Hello viewers. In today's world, something which is the most important thing for all of us, be it the economies, be it the government, be it the common people like us, is information, or if we put it more technically, that is data. Hello everyone, I am Dr. Shumayela Hasan, Assistant Professor from the Department of Economics, the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. And here I am today to introduce to the new course of data analysis. Let's quickly talk about the overview of the module, that is, what are the topics that we are going to cover up in this module. Firstly, we are going to talk about what is data analysis. Secondly, we'll talk about the steps involved in data analysis. Next, we'll go on to explain what are the different types of data analysis, and then we would pick up a few real-life examples that support data analysis. So let's quickly, first and foremost, understand what exactly data analysis means. So the basic purpose of data analysis is nothing but, first and foremost, to identify a research problem. Now, my dear viewers, research in itself is again and again searching something which is a fact or something which is already existing. So therefore, you need to find out a research problem which has not been addressed in the literature previously, which is available with us. So data analysis is a tool which will help you to identify your research problems. Secondly, data analysis helps us to identify the research problem as well as find out the solution to the same problem. Next, the purpose of data analysis is to determine the trends that are there. Trends in different economic variables, trends in the industry, trends in the economy, so on and so forth. And lastly, you will be able to find out the functional relationships between different economic variables under study when you are analyzing the data at hand. I've been using this word time and again, data. So basically, what data stands for, or what is data? So let's understand data first. Data can be defined as any piece of useful information. Now, sometimes we call it that data, but data is not the correct word. We should always use the word as data. Data in itself is a plural form of information. And of course, if you put it this way, that economic data is something which is more important for economies. So what is economic data? Now, economic data can be defined as any useful information which is an outcome or a result of economic decision making. Now let's quickly talk about what are the different steps which are involved in data analysis. Firstly, we'll divide these steps into two sections. The steps to be conducted before the collection of the data by the researcher and the steps to be followed by the researcher after the collection of data. So let's talk about the first section, that is the data before collection of data. What are the essentials that are required on the part of the researcher? Firstly, we should be very sure about the data collection method. Now there are several methods through which you can collect data. These methods are usually divided into the primary methods of data collection and the secondary methods of data collection. Primary data collection methods include all those methods of data collection which we use for obtaining first-hand or primary information. This information is not existing anywhere in the literature. Coming to the secondary methods of data collection, the secondary methods of data collection are those methods which you employ in order to collect the data which is already available in the literature, either in the form of published reports, in the form of articles, newspapers, magazine, internet, etc., etc. So therefore, it is mandatory on the part of the researcher that before going into the collection of data, he should be designing an appropriate strategy to choose the method of data collection very carefully. The second step would be how to process the data that you have collected. So therefore, you should have a strategy in mind that first and foremost, you decide the data collection method, and then you also have to devise the method through which you are going to process the data. And lastly, if you are not a trained data analyst, it is most important for you to consult a statistician who is a subject expert. Coming to the steps for data analysis, after the collection of data, first and foremost, you have to process the data, right? So processing of data, what does that mean now? The processing of data would mean that you have to see what type of data has been collected. You have to clean that data. You have to clarify each and every point that has been collected as data for your research purpose. You have to remove, for example, removal of outliers is something through which we clean the data. So therefore, unless and until you are cleaning the data, the raw data is not of that much value for you that you can use it for your research purpose. So the first and foremost, you have to process and clean the data. Secondly, you have to prepare the tables and charts. That means the graphical representation of data should be done at this particular step. Next follows the analysis and interpretation of the findings. That means after representing your data in the form of charts and tables, what have you found out, right? So therefore, you have to write down the interpretation and the findings. Next is again consult the statistician, right? Because you have to take his expert advice. Then you have to prepare for editing, that is the first draft of your interpretation, findings and result, that is the first draft of your report. And finally, you go on to prepare the report for presentation. Now let's talk about the different kinds of data analytics. The different kinds of data analytics can be of two types. First one, descriptive analysis, and second, the inferential analysis. So let's talk about the descriptive statistics first. So let's first talk about the descriptive statistics. Now what is descriptive statistics? It is a numerical value that is obtained from the sample that gives meaning to the collected data. And this descriptive statistics is basically used in descriptive analysis, right? By using the descriptive statistics, say for example, the frequency distributions, the measures of central tendency like the mean, median and mode, measures of variability such as range, the quartile deviation, mean deviation and the standard deviation, and of course the bivariate descriptive analysis like the contingency tables and the correlation analysis. So descriptive statistics includes all these tools, and with the help of the descriptive statistics, what we do is the descriptive analysis. Now descriptive analysis refers to the description of a particular sample. How do you describe the sample that you have collected? And here I would like to mention that it is very difficult for a researcher to go to each and every element of the population for the study. So therefore, we take up a sample which is a representative sample of the population and then conduct our study on that sample. And as and when the validation is done, we generalize those inferences which we have got through the sampling. We generalize these inferences to the population. So whenever I use a word sample, please remember that sample is a part of the population which is picked up for the researcher's study. Descriptive analysis always has a conclusion which refer to only the samples, right? And then this summarizes the data and describes the sample statistics, right? Now let's talk about the inferential analysis. After describing your data and then finding out whether it is fit for further procedures, fit for further analysis, the researcher or the statistician then goes on for the inferential analysis. Now, inferential analysis refers to the use of statistical tests either to test the significant relationship among the different variables under study or to find out the statistical support for the hypothesis testing. Let's talk about what all is included under the inferential statistic. Inferential statistics includes the numerical values which enable the researcher to draw the conclusions about a population based on the characteristics of the population sample, right? And then secondly, it is more based on the laws of probability. Now at the beginning I talked about economic data and the difference between data and economic data. In the common parlance or in common notion, we describe economic data as the figures like the GDP, the gross domestic product, inflation rate, growth rate, price levels, so on and so forth. But in reality, economic data is much more than this. Economic data is the outcome of any economic decision-making process. Now let's talk about few of the examples of economic data from the real life and where this data analysis can play a very important role. Let's consider this research question. Does a small class size result in better performance of these students? So we are taking a hypothetical example wherein we have a particular class which has a larger batch size, and we want to reduce the batch size and see that whether the reduced batch size has some effect on the performance of the students or not. Now there are two things involved in this analysis. The first one is the small class size, that how much that class size should be. How much do we have to reduce the class size to so that the performance of the students becomes effective? And secondly, it also involves a cost-benefit analysis. Now, the decision of the management to reduce the class sizes in a particular institution, it will be definitely concerning certain cost decisions as well, right? Now, what could be these cost decisions? Like for example, they will have to hire new teachers if they are splitting an entire big class into smaller classes, right? There would be cost involved for hiring, there would be cost involved for infrastructure, and of course, there will be other maintenance charges also. So what is cost-benefit analysis? The benefits of this analysis will only be calculated by measuring the learning outcomes here. So that means the cost involved and the learning outcome. That is, the cost involved and the learning outcome should match each other, correct? The learning outcome in this case can be measured with the help of the marks that the students are obtaining. Therefore, this is the outcome of the economic decision making, and this cost-benefit analysis will be called as the economic data. Let's take another real-life example and understand the data analysis. Let's take an example basically from the economic theory. Research question under study would be, does higher income lead to higher consumption, right? So now these are two basic terminologies used in economic theory, income and consumption. So let's first talk about income. Now income is earned by a particular person in an economy, or we can say the people of the economy earn income only when they have the willingness or they show the willingness to participate in the workforce. Secondly, their contribution in the labor force also matters. And thirdly, what is the opportunity cost of supplying your labor? So how is income decided? Income is basically decided with the help of few pointers like, first, the type of job that you are into. Secondly, how much the industry is ready to pay you. And thirdly, the cost-benefit analysis of the participation in the labor force. Now let's talk about the second portion of the research problem, that is consumption. Now, consumption of a household is also a result of the economic decision making. How do you decide your consumption? First and foremost, it is definitely based on the income that you are getting, and of course, the prices or the price level which is prevalent in the market. Of course, there is a tool called the consumer's equilibrium wherein you are able to equate the satisfaction that you are getting with the price that you are paying, and this analysis helps you to understand that how much should be your consumption or how much should be the price for a product that you are paying. So therefore, in the real life, the statistician will use the data of the income and consumption to reach out to the conclusions using the statistical as well as the mathematical tools. Now let's take the last example of the module. Does profitability of a firm determine the returns of its stocks, right? Now, the profitability of the firm depends on what? It depends on how much the firm is producing and what is the cost of production. Production function is the technical relationship between the input and the output of an industry. So therefore, with the help of data analytical tools or statistical tools, mathematical tools, we will be able to determine the optimum production function for a particular industry. So for the introduction of the data analysis, this is all from our side. Stay tuned for more in the coming modules. Thank you so much.